Hey, welcome to Integrative Preparedness and American Reversion. I'm Steve Smith. This one will go up on both. First, I should probably apologize ahead of time. I came down with a cold last night, and I've gone through this whole year and a half thing with all this horrible, sickness. Never so much as a sneeze, and I've been around sick people every day. And all of a sudden, last night, it just hit me. So I've been feeling rocky all day. And I know what happened was that I stopped taking that magic vitamin that keeps your immune system up. I better not say it, but I'll tell you that and things like that. Make sure your immune system is up, and there are many ways to do it. Look into it for yourself. Um, I put up, oh, and if you hear some noises in the background, my wife is back in, Kelly is back in making soap because she makes soap. She has a soap business. Beautiful stuff. Maybe one day I'll have some of it on here. Some people have asked. And my daughter is making Rice Krispie treats for us to eat after dinner that Kelly is also making. And one of my sons is doing something. So anyway, they're back in the house, and it's just an afternoon at the Smith house, and there's usually noise. So I'll try to talk loud enough in case we have some noise. And other than that, either ignore it or enjoy it or whatever. Welcome to all the new people, to all the new subscribers, both here and over on Patreon. Um, and that kind of leads me to what I realize I'm talking kind of low today. It's this stuff. Uh, I put up something over on the Patreon on integrative preparedness. I'm going to put it also on the one Patreon on American Reversion. And it was an excellent video, a production by Curtis Bowers, a former congressman that talks about a lot. He expands a lot on what I'm going to talk about today. And so I do suggest that you go over and watch it because we are in a war. And the problem, and we have been for a long time, and it's not a war that most people will admit, I think, that we're in. And it's been like that ever since this particular war started. Sometime back, I read a few outtakes from the goals laid down by the U.S. Communist Party back in 1958. And I took them directly from this book, and I suggest that everybody read this book because you need to know the enemy. I made one just the other day on knowing the enemy. If you don't know the enemy, you don't know how to fight it, how to fight them. And what I'll be taking this from today is out of The Naked Communist by Cleon Skousen. We are in a war, we have been, for a long time. It started back in the teens, to be honest. People don't realize how strong a presence the Communist Party had here in the United States during the 20s and the 30s. People don't realize that Roosevelt, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and one of my great uncles was one of his vice presidents, how many communists he actually had in his cabinet. Or not in his cabinet, I'm sorry, I misspoke. That's the cold talking. In his administration. Truman kind of carried that forward. Eisenhower kind of put a clamp on it. Kennedy put a clamp on it. Maybe I'll talk about more of this later. I don't want to get too far afield because I want to get to these tenets right here pretty quickly. Through the years, it's people who tried to warn against the communist takeover of the United States were scoffed at, made to look like idiots. If you look back to McCarthy, they gave it the term McCarthyism. If you look back to Reagan, Reagan was a staunch adversary of communism. He understood the communist threat. If you look back to Kennedy, he understood it. And clear back to Patton, if you remember, maybe you've heard his reference at the end of World War II. He said, "We have fought the wrong enemy," and he realized that it was the Russians who were the long-term adversary of importance. Excuse me for just a second. I'll be right back. Okay, that's the problem with trying to shoot a video with a cold. You're probably going to have to take some breaks. So I'm going to get into this right now because this is a war. All of these little things that we're dealing with, all of the small things that's happening in our country, it is each of these are an aspect of one overall attack against our country. And it's my opinion that if we don't understand that, we'll just be fighting little brush fires all over the place, as opposed to fighting, or at least trying to fight, the forest fires that's shooting out, the sparks that are causing these brush fires. So I'm going to get right to this. Again, it's from The Naked Communist by Cleon Skousen, and this comes directly. There are 45 goals that were laid down by the U.S. Communist Party, and these are them. And I'll probably have a few things to say about them as we go along. And I'm sorry, I forgot if I said this or not, but I had read some of these, and then I had people ask me if I would read all of them. So that kind of led me to this. And Curtis Bauer's video that I put up over on Patreon that just came out really made me return to this. So we'll start with this. And some of these may seem a little bit, well, some will seem more important than others. Some will stand out more important than others. But all of them work together. And remember that these were the things that the Communist Party of the United States said these were the things that would bring America down and would bring America under communist control. Okay, it doesn't necessarily mean that, that the communist premier is going to come over here and rule America. They won't have to. Communism, those within our borders, Americans, so-called Americans, okay, American citizens who hold to communist ideals are taking our country down. Whether we'll be able to fight back and overcome this, well, we don't know yet. We'll see. We have a pretty soft country right now, and we have a country where most of the people refuse to see things like this. So here we go. Number one, U.S. acceptance of coexistence as the only alternative to atomic war. Now remember that we had nuclear superiority for a long time, and we still do. I mean, this is all very secret, and I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say that we still do. I don't know. You don't know. There's a few people who do know, but I do know that the MAD doctrine, mutually assured destruction, still holds between us and the other superpowers. Well, semi-superpowers, but they're gaining on us, and we have allowed that. Number two, U.S. willingness to capitulate in preference to engaging in atomic war. Well, isn't that the truth? We have given away stuff through the years all over, to those in. Excuse me just a second. Did I hit that pause button soon enough to block out that sneeze? I hope I did. We'll see. I probably looked funny before I hit it. 3, develop the illusion that total disarmament by the United States would be a demonstration of moral strength. How many have we heard say that? We have heard that has been a Democrat and a progressive line and a peacenik line and a hippie line, all these peace people. They have been saying that forever. If we didn't have them, they wouldn't need them. Yeah, the only reason that they have atomic weapons is because they're afraid that we're going to use them on us. So if we get rid of our atomic weapons, they will too. The stupidity that has driven so much of the thought in our country is unbelievable. 4, permit free trade between all nations regardless of communist affiliation and regardless of whether or not items could be used for war. Pretty self-explanatory, okay? 5, extension of long-term loans to Russia and Soviet satellites. Yes, that's right. They couldn't support themselves. Half the time they didn't produce the grain that they needed to feed their people. But we, their declared enemy, should provide for them. Of course, they say long-term loans. They never paid back the loans. They just want us to give it. And of course, those of you who are old as I am, who remember the big pictures of all of our big cargo planes dropping off these huge pallets of food with the American flag on the side saying, gift from the people of the United States. Well, they took us for a fool. We were feeding them. We were feeding those who were bent on our destruction. Just like so many of us now, when we spend our money with companies who have come out in support of positions that are completely contradictory to American values and completely contradictory to the values that most of us, try to raise our families with. Same thing. 6, provide American aid to all nations, regardless of communist domination. That's another thing. So the commies are in charge of these countries, but we now, and this is the Communist Party here in the United States saying we should do this. And guess what? We did it. We sent foreign aid to every tin pot dictator in the world that hates us. At whose expense? At the American citizens and taxpayers' expense. Who paid for that? We did. 7, grant recognition of Red China. Admission of Red China to the UN. The UN is another thing that people should pay attention to. Many of you will remember, at least I do, when I was in grade school, and the big push of UNICEF, and we were all excited when we'd go out trick-or-treating, and at school we'd get our little, they'd tell us how important it was for us to get our little UNICEF milk cartons and take it around, and while we got candy for ourselves, get people to give money to UNICEF for the starving children around the world. Well, this all went into a slush fund at the United Nations, which was and is a totally and anti-American organization. I remember one time, and it was the first time that I was kind of introduced to this. We were on a family trip. We were visiting some of my family down in Lubbock. Well, it was either Lubbock or San Angelo. I forget which, both in Texas. For those Texans will know that. Maybe people in Jersey don't know that. And we went into a diner after church. Went to church, then went to a restaurant for after church dinner. And we sat at it. It was one of those places where they had little paper placemats, and this one had flags of the world all around the border imprinted on the placemat. And my aunt looked down there, and she stood up. And now my aunt, you'd have to know her. She was I forget if she was in the Navy or the Marine. She was a nurse, very stern kind of person. She stood up and says, "We're leaving. We're not eating here." And man, she walked out, and we all thought, "What in the world's going on?" But we went with her, and it turned out we asked, "What was wrong?" She says, "That had a United Nations flag as top center of all those flags of the world." She said, "We are not eating there," and she probably let the owner of the place know. Who knows if it did any good or not. Set up East and West Germany as separate states in spite of Khrushchev's promise in 1955 to settle the Germany question by free elections under supervision of the UN. Well, we saw that, right? East and West Germany were separate political entities forever until the reunification. Now, I won't go any more into that. 9, prolong the conferences to ban atomic tests because the U.S. has agreed to suspend tests as long as negotiations are in progress. That's right. We were always stupid on this. Our leaders were always weak and stupid, and all the Soviets had to do was to get us to agree to suspend any further tests or development while talks were in progress. And of course they were developing and testing, but they knew that we would abide by the rules for the most part, and they would not. And of course, you can never blame your enemy for trying to get the better of you. If the enemy is understandable. The problem was people within our own country who were supporting these communist views and painting us as the aggressors. 10, allow all Soviet satellites individual representation in the UN. Yeah, well, they just wanted, it's kind of like packing the court, right? The more people they get in there, the more satellite countries they get in there. They're all speaking with the voice of Moscow, but they wanted separate seats for all of these. And if you'll look at, it's been a while since I have, but if you'll look at the countries that are on the human rights committees and whatever, it's just astounding. The, the the countries that are on these standing committees of the United Nations. Just a second. Okay, I do apologize for all these little blips that I have to take in these breaks. I probably look like Rudolph now. 11. Promote the UN as the only hope for mankind. Right, and how many people think that now, right? If its charter is rewritten, demand that it be set up as a one world government with its own independent armed forces. Yes, it has been. Okay, and if you see what the UN forces have done around the world, amazing. And if you're not familiar with that, look it up. Some communist leaders believe the world can be taken over as easily by the UN as by Moscow, and I would say that probably more so. Sometimes these two centers compete with each other, as they are now doing in the Congo. Yeah, Okay, that's. I'm not going to go into that. That's extremely complicated. 12. Resist any attempt to outlaw the Communist Party. 13. Do away with all loyalty oaths, including the Pledge of Allegiance. And that went farther than that. It went with, in military or police or when certain there are other agencies that you have to take an oath for. Although we've seen so many people that take the oath. If you don't mean it, you'll take it because you just need to take it to get in there and do your dirty stuff. 14. Continue giving Russia access to the U.S. Patent Office. Now that's a deep subject we won't go into, but just imagine that. You can Google this yourself. It'll take forever to explain the problems that have come about because of this. Just imagine Russia having access to the U.S. Patent Office. Okay, 15. Capture one or both of the political parties in the United States. Well, they got one of them some time ago, and they've got about half of the other one, right? And remember, these are the goals set down by the Communist Party in the United States in 1958. 16. Use technical decisions of the courts to weaken basic American institutions by claiming their activities violate civil rights. 17. Get control of the schools. Use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda. Soften the curriculum. Get control of teachers' unions. Put the party line in textbooks. Check, 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 every one of those. 18. Gain control of all student newspapers. When was the last time you read a student newspaper? I haven't for a long time, but when I had businesses in college towns, I did, and it was, you thought you were reading Pravda. And that was back in the 90s. 19. Use student riots to foment public protests against programs or organizations which are under communist attack. 20. Infiltrate the press. Get control of book review assignments, editorial writing, and policy-making positions. Pretty much all of them, right? Except a couple of the new upstart ones. Now realize, this has been going on for a long time. And as a result of how the information being fed to the American people was skewed, it's understandable how the American people have changed in their opinions of things and have stopped understanding the dangers of communism because it's been fed to them, spoon-fed to them, these essentially socialist and communist positions as something that's good and right and nice and fair, equity. 21. Gain control of key positions in radio, TV, and motion pictures. Yeah. 22. continued discrediting American culture by degrading all forms of artistic expression. An American communist cell was told to, quote, eliminate all good sculpture from parks and buildings, substitute shapeless, awkward, and meaningless forms. I don't know what it's like where you live, but around here, half this stuff I've said that's in parks and in greenways around, they look like junk that fell off the back of a junk truck, and they call it art. 23. Control art critics and directors of art museums. Our plan, quote, is to promote ugliness, repulsive, meaningless art. Remember the great artists you ever used to go to art galleries and you see the paintings of the Dutch masters, and it was just art was just amazing, in my opinion. You go back to the great musical masters, Mozart, Beethoven, thing that may not be your thing, and to be honest, I would rather listen to ZZ Top or Trace Atkins than most of that stuff. But it was beautiful. It was complex. It was amazing. It showed, the ability of the human mind as it is artistically expressed. Look what passes for music nowadays, or not music, rap, or whatever it is. Look at it. It's horrendous. Eliminate all laws governing obscenity by calling them censorship and a violation of free speech and free press. Yeah. Now, obscenity laws, I think that people ought to be able to consume whatever they want to. I'm not a big censorship person. So I'll leave that alone. 25. Break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity in books, magazines, motion pictures, radio, and TV. Well, that's right. It used to be. Now, and I'll lump this in with 26 here. Present homosexuality, degeneracy, and promiscuity as normal, natural, and healthy. Okay, those two kind of go together. And I would say, back in the day, you had to go to, certain stores in funny parts of town to find magazines and books that covered these kinds of things. Now you see them in children's books in elementary school. Now you see them, some of this stuff in cartoons, promoting lifestyles that, are different from the American ideals of the past. 27. Infiltrate the churches and replace revealed religion with social religion. Right? Discredit the Bible and emphasize the need for intellectual maturity which does not need a religious crutch. Well, most of the churches with which I'm familiar, and I've quit a lot of them when I discovered this, they got away from the gospel, and they replaced it with a social religion because they want butts in the pews, which means dollars in the plates. 28. Eliminate prayer or any phase of religious expression in the schools on the ground that it violates the principle of separation in church and state. Now, I know most of you will understand that there was no such thing as a separation of church and state. That comes from a letter that Jefferson wrote to the Baptist Church in Danbury, Connecticut, and it was not in the Constitution. He just wanted to assure them that there wasn't going to be a legally designated national religion that everyone had to go by. Our country was based on Judeo-Christian principles. The Bible was used in most schools as the first book by which people learned to read. Our founders, and I'll get into this, I made one some time ago on the fact that America was a Christian country. It was founded as such, and it was an integral part of the life of America. It was the foundation, religious principles, and the Christian religion were the foundations of our country. I'm sorry, that's going to upset some people. I'm sorry, but it's the truth. And if you don't understand it's the truth, you need to study a little bit more. Sadly, it's gotten far away from that. 29, discredit the American Constitution by calling it inadequate, old-fashioned, out of step with modern needs, a hindrance to cooperation between nations on a worldwide basis. Right, how many people have we heard say that the Constitution is a living document? It doesn't mean what it meant. It means whatever we want it to mean now, kind of like they say about the Bible. No. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean what it says. It means what we want it to say now. 30, discredit the American founding fathers. Present them as selfish aristocrats who had no concern for the common man. 31, belittle all forms of American culture and discourage the teaching of American history on the grounds that it was only a minor part of the big picture. It in many cases was the big picture. Give more emphasis to Russian history since the communists took over. Well, I wish they did. I wish they would tell more of the truth of Russian history and how communism has destroyed a major part of this world and been the result of the deaths of hundreds of millions of people. That would be good. Most of our teachers don't know anything about that. 32, support any socialist movement to give centralized control over any part of the culture. Education? Check. Social agencies? Check. Welfare programs? Check. Mental health clinics? Check. Centralized control. 33, eliminate all laws or procedures which interfere with the operation of the communist apparatus. Let's read that one again, because I don't have to go away. You all realize what that means. I just want to read it one more time more slowly. Eliminate all laws or procedures which interfere with the operation of the communist apparatus. Eliminate, this is 34, eliminate the House Committee on Un-American Activities. Do you all remember that? A lot of people get that mixed up with Joseph McCarthy. He was a senator. He wasn't in the House. But they understood and they saw the extent of communist infiltration into journalism and Hollywood and the government, many aspects of our society. And they were investigating it. And, of course, right here, eliminate the House Committee on Un-American Activities. They got the American people to believe that this was un-American going after the communists who were trying to destroy America. Okay. 35, discredit and eventually dismantle the FBI. Interesting. Well, they've done a pretty good job of that now. J. Edgar Hoover, for all of his faults, which have been widely talked about, he did understand the communist threat. He knew that was the main threat to our country. And while he was in there, he worked at it. He worked hard at it. That's why they wanted to dismantle the FBI. His predecessor, the first FBI director after him, I forget if he died or retired, after him was Clarence Kelly. I knew Kelly. He had been a former FBI agent, and then he was chief of police here in Kansas City, Missouri. And he was the last, as far as I'm concerned, law enforcement professional that ran the FBI. I've worked a lot with the FBI, a lot of fine guys on the lower level there, a lot like in other law enforcement places, the lower level, you get all the true believers. In order to advance in most law enforcement agencies nowadays, you got to be the person who toes the line, whatever that line is, and that line keeps shifting to the left. And if they want to make any rank and keep their career and their goodies, they've got to move with that line. And they do. And that's why the FBI is, I won't say what I really think because I'm saving that for another video. 36, infiltrate and gain control of more unions. Yep. 37, infiltrate and gain control of big business. Well, yeah. 38, transfer some of the powers of arrest from the police. Listen to this. Listen to this. You know what's going on in our country right now, right? Now, here just in Kansas City, they took $45 million away from law enforcement budget of the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department and shifted it over to social programs. Okay, we know that all those strange cities around are wanting to defund their police and replace them with, I don't know what, social workers, whatever. Listen to this. Number 38, written in 1958 by the Communist Party in the United States, transfer some of the powers of arrest from the police to social agencies. Treat all behavioral problems as psychiatric disorders, for which we could administer drugs, which no one but psychiatrists can understand or treat. And guess who's going to control the psychiatrists? And guess how people are going to be put in jail and in prison on the order of a psychiatrist. 39, dominate the psychiatric profession and use mental health laws as a means of gaining coercive control over those who oppose communist goals. Right. Well, you don't believe in these goals of ours? You must be crazy. 40, discredit the family as an institution. Encourage promiscuity and easy divorce. That first part, now promiscuity and easy divorce, we've seen that. The first part, discredit the family as an institution. You remember that one of the foundational principles of the organization Black Lives Matter was to destroy the nuclear family. And the two women, and I forget their names, who began that organization, proudly said that they were trained Marxist organizers. Okay, simply the truth. 41, emphasize the need to raise children away from the negative influence of parents. It takes a village, right? Attribute prejudices, mental blocks, and retarding of children to suppressive influence of parents. You know, all the movements of trying to get all year's school year, and extending the school day. Now kids don't just have lunch there. They can have breakfast there. They can have lunch there. They can have dinner there because mom and dad, need to get to work. They got to go. I can't pick up my kid. You can't believe the number of parents that we have asked us, well, ask Kelly because she's the one who's available most of the time, to watch their kids, take their kids here and there all over the place because they just can't do it. They can't make it there. They're at work. They're not going to get home in time, whatever. 42, create the impression that violence and insurrection are legitimate aspects of the American tradition, that students and special interest groups should rise up and use, quote, united force to solve economic, political, or social problems. Well, we've